I'm so proud to be joined by these brave Texas Democrats. You know, I became a voting rights attorney because of what was happening in Texas. Because in my home state, the right to vote has been under attack for far too long. It was already the hardest state in the country to vote before this bill. You know, the right to vote is sacred. Here, in this temple of democracy, I was on the House floor when the rioters tried to break in to overturn an election. And that big lie is what led to SB 7. You know, Senator West said it well. I watched him at 2 a.m. on the Senate floor of a holiday weekend. In Texas, they're trying to make it so you can get a beer at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, but you can't go vote? It's unbelievable. I'm telling you, I've worked in voting rights. This time is different. Hear me when I say this. Making it easier to overturn elections is different. What we are seeing in Texas is different. This is not Democrats and Republicans in the back and forth that so many people have become used to in this country. This is about an attempt to make sure that the will of the people of Texas will never be heard. And we have to act here at the federal level. Now, the House has passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and we will pass H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, to restore pre-clearance. We have to have the support of the United States Senate. These folks showed us what's possible when you throw out whatever the rule book may be because you know what's right. We can't allow a Senate rule to stand in the way of our democracy. And I just want to say thank you to these Texas Democrats for their bravery. Thank you for being here and highlighting this issue. We are all in your debt, and we can all learn something from your leadership. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Jackson Lee.
I'm going to go vote real quick. Here's the list of remaining speakers. I'll be back.
Let me thank my good friends, Congressman Castro and Congressman Veasey, and I know that my other colleagues will come back. To this state delegation, I will be very pointed. What you stood in opposition to was Jim Crowism returning its ugly head. For those of us who know the leaders that are no longer with us, like Barbara Jordan, who created the Section 5 opportunity for the state of Texas through the language provision, we realize what we have gone through. So take a ride with me down memory lane and realize that when Dr. King moved the signature of Lyndon Baines Johnson, it was because they were willing to march from Selma to Montgomery. They were willing to be brutalized. And yes, as John Lewis, my late dear friend, said, he shed a little blood on that bridge. On May 31st, May 30th, you shed a little blood. And we should never ignore it. And the papers and those throughout the state of Texas has to realize that nonviolently, even though this citadel of democracy was attacked violently by those soaking in the big lie and advocating for untruth across America, our brave Democratic state legislators never wavered, never gave up, and never gave in, and never gave out. We, as members of the United States Congress, even though our voice is a little raspy, will step down. We must step to the right and the left. It is not a partisan issue, but it's a Jim Crow issue. It is an issue where those of color were denied. And I close on this. When the first voter ID law was enacted in Texas, there were at least 8 counties where there was no Department of Public Safety office for Hispanics to even go and vote, most of them Hispanic counties. And so we know what the intent is. To the state legislature, to Governor Abbott, hear our voice. We will not be turned around. We are going to fight and fight and fight and use the mantle of democracy and nonviolence to pass H.R. 1, H.R. 4, and we will speak for the people because the people will not be silenced. Let me ask Congressman Green, here he is, to come forward and to take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I love my country and I love my state. But it is said that you shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. And the truth is, Texas has been a bad actor for a long time. It was Texas that gave us Smith versus Allwright. Lonnie Smith was a dentist in Houston, Texas. He wanted to vote in the primary. He could not vote because Texas had an all-white primary. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional. Well, John Terry was living in Fort Bend County. He wanted to vote. He couldn't vote because Texas had gone to, in Fort Bend County, a white pre-primary. The Supreme Court said that is unconstitutional. So this is the latest iteration of Texas in an effort to grab power. It is about voter suppression, but it's also about power. This is a power grab on behalf of those who hold the highest offices in the state of Texas, and we have a duty and obligation and a responsibility to do all that we can to stop the power grab in Texas. And now I'd like to introduce someone who's a part of this avant-garde movement to stop the power grab. The Honorable Royce West, Senator, Dallas. Senator, if you would.
Congressman Green, thank you very much. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for being here. From the beginning to the end, you're here. Thank you very much for doing that. And also Majority Leader Schumer, my colleagues in both the House and the Senate. Let's follow the facts, ladies and gentlemen, just briefly. America is changing. The demographics of America is changing. What you see before you represents that demographic. And these are individuals that are Americans, that have been taught the principles of this country in terms of that you participate in the voting process in order to put people in position in order to affect policy and obviously appropriation in this country. For some strange reason, when you follow the facts, what you'll see is not only do we have issues concerning voter suppression, we also have critical race theory legislation. We have been here before in the state of Texas. Back in 2003, when we had to fight mid-decade redistricting, we ended up having to use parliamentary procedures in order to try to delay and try to turn back that type of legislation. That was in 2003. And now we find ourselves here in 2021. What we come to Washington for is obviously to pass the two bills that we've talked about, but also asking our colleagues here in Congress to figure out what leverage they have as congresspersons, as leaders in the legislative and executive branch of government, that they can utilize in order to help us get the leverage that we need to make certain that suppressive voter laws are not passed in Texas. The only thing people of color want to do is to participate and make certain that we carry on the legacy of democracy in this country. And that's what we're fighting for, and we will fight and use every tool at our disposal in order to make certain that we're not turned back.
It's now my honor to bring another member from the House of Representatives, the Honorable Lloyd Doggett, who knows what this is all about because he's been through it on many occasions and has had the opportunity to represent a district that has been drawn in many different ways. The Honorable Lloyd Doggett.
Thank you, Al. Right behind you.
Okay, go for it.
So these legislators are clearly Texas tough. They've demonstrated their courage. They've made a difference. But as much as they represent the hope that we have for Texas, unless we establish some uniform national standards, their courage will have been for naught in accomplishing the protection of our democracy that we're seeking. I think it's time to get down and look at the provisions of the For the People Act. Many good provisions, I support them, but to identify those that deal directly with voter suppression of the type that is going on in Texas today, and the issue of political gerrymandering, of which I have some experience, and to center on those. And if there's only one bill that this Congress can pass in this session, the one and most important one is dealing with those issues, political gerrymandering and voter suppression, because the future of our democracy is at stake, as these legislators have indicated. We need to back them up. We need to get to the core of the bill and pass it as soon as possible, because the longer it is delayed, the more likely that some Texas Republican federal judge will say we're interfering in the election and try to put it off to another day. We need action now. We need it in the Senate now. Hopefully the presence of these great, courageous legislators will help us get there. Thank you.
Next person you're going to hear from is Lizzie Fletcher from Houston.
Great, thanks. Well, thank you so much, Congressman Veasey, for bringing us together. I'm delighted to be here with you and to be here with these incredible representatives from the Texas legislature who have come up here to show us in Washington how critical it is that we do everything we can to protect the right to vote for people in Texas and for people across the country. And I'm proud to stand here with them. I'm proud to stand here with my colleagues to say that we are unified. We are a coalition of people from across the state who are going to do everything we can to protect the rights of Texans and all Americans. And the thing is, I had the great privilege when I was a candidate in 2018 to bring Congressman John Lewis to my district in Houston. And the outpouring of people who showed up to meet us everywhere we went demonstrated the importance and also the length of this battle. And it's why I was so proud to be a co-sponsor of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, H.R. 4, and of H.R. 1, the For the People Act. And it's why it's more critical now than ever that we pass those bills, that we continue the work that so many people have fought so hard for so long. It is up to us, and I'm here to tell you that our Texas congressional delegation and that members of Congress are committed to continuing this fight and to working, all of us, to restore the Voting Rights Act, to protect the right to vote, and to make clear what is at stake, because there's nothing short of our democracy that is on the line, and we're here to fight for it. And I'm so proud to stand here with these fighters, with these people who have made sure that we are able to do the work we need to do here in Washington, who've given us the time in Texas to protect the rights of Texans. That's what we're all here to do, and I'm proud to be a part of this coalition.
Thank you. Representative Fletcher, thank you very much. That is the last speaker, but and you probably just heard the bell. They've just called the third vote. Are there? We have time for a couple of questions. Did y'all have a couple of questions you want to ask?
Yeah, Congressman, it's for you and for anybody from the Texas delegation.
Okay, please state your.
Ryan Nobles from CNN.
Thank you.
You know, Senator Manchin is clearly the most important player in this, at least from the Democratic perspective. He said that he doesn't support H.R. 1. He's unwilling to move ahead with the filibuster. This group didn't even get an audience with him today. He wasn't in the Democratic conference meeting. He had them meet with his staff instead. Are you disappointed that Senator Manchin didn't offer them the opportunity to at least hear directly from them and instead had his staff meet with them instead?
I know that the majority leader is doing everything he can, that he understands the importance of these bills. I've spoken with the majority leader myself personally and explained particularly to him about Texas and the situation that we're in that's a little bit different than the rest of the country and that we share with about 4 or 5 other southern states plus Arizona. And so, you know, we're focused on getting this done. I think that it's going to be done. I'm very hopeful, but the clock is ticking. We need to do something now.
Somebody from the delegation can answer that?
Let me say this to you also. We are legislators just like our federal counterparts, and we understand how the system works. We had members of our delegation meet with his chief of staff today and kind of give exactly what our position is. And we'll eventually meet with Senator Manchin. You know, just because we didn't meet today doesn't mean that we're not going to meet with him, all right? And so we'll meet with him, and it may be tomorrow. It may not be tomorrow. It may be Thursday. But we will meet with him so he can make certain that he understands, once he's adequately briefed by his chief of staff, of some of the issues that we have and the comparison between his state and our state. We'll meet with him and talk with him about the issues that we have.
Emily Brooks, Washington Examiner. Is this conversation that you're having with with the delegation with members of Congress ultimately just about ending the filibuster? If you're trying to get this bill across the line as soon as possible, and if not, are you talking with any Republicans?
You know, this is about voting rights for the constituents that we specifically represent in Texas and trying to stop bad voter suppression bills in our state. I mean, if you look at the growth in Texas, I mentioned before, it's overwhelmingly Hispanic and Black. And, you know, we need to be trying to do everything we can to encourage people to vote. I love what they did in Harris County to make it a lot easier for people to vote, putting things in like 24-hour voting that all people, regardless of if they were Democrat, Republican, Black, white, were able to take advantage of. And so that's what we're here trying to protect today.
I just briefly, my name's Jose Menendez. I'm a senator from San Antonio, state senator. But you know, one of the things that we have to agree is that this is actually to protect everyone's right to vote, because it doesn't make any sense. It wasn't just Democrats that availed themselves of the drive-through voting in Harris County. It was people of all walks of life. People, doctors, nurses, first responders, people who work late into the night during COVID. I mean, so we're trying to protect everyone's right to vote. And so I think it's evident that there is a hypocrisy when only some rules will apply in urban settings, but they don't apply in rural settings. So this needs I think Senator Manchin, when he finally, he spent 14 years in the legislature in West Virginia. When he hears the details of how bad the legislation was in Texas, I hope he understands that we're not talking about just protecting the rights to vote for Democrats. It's for all Americans. And that's why the federal legislation is so important.
And and Senator Byrd was very revered in the U.S. Senate, very revered for his mastery of the rules and understanding of the rules. And even Senator Byrd was for making amendments to the filibuster. So, and I want to remind everybody, in the state of Texas, two things happened. When I was in the state legislature, they passed a rule that said that they were not going to have the filibuster in the state Senate for redistricting a voter ID. And then fast forward, maybe last session, Representative Anchia, I think that the lieutenant governor actually raised the threshold for the filibuster rule, so Democrats couldn't participate in that. So, this is something that people have done. You saw what happened with the Supreme Court and how they even though Mitch McConnell said that you shouldn't put a Supreme Court appointee during an election year, and he put one in October, right before a November election. And so the Republicans are always changing these rules, and we need to look more closely at them, particularly if we can stop people from being discriminated against in places like Texas. Representative Crockett?
You asked about the goal. The goal is to make sure that we protect the right to vote. I don't really care how we get there. If we get there because we get the votes, because we're talking to Democrats and we're talking to Republicans, then that works for me. If we get there because we have to get rid of the filibuster on this specific issue, then that works for me. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all. When we came here with one goal. The reality is that when we killed that bill, there were many approaches that were taken to try to figure out how can we kill this bill. We finally got to the point that we decided that we were going with the nuclear option. I do think that we call it nuclear for a reason. It is to be reserved only for the most intense and most ridiculous times. If we get to the point that we decide that we can't protect our democracy but for getting rid of the filibuster, then that's what we will be calling for. But right now, any option to get us protections is on the table.
Thank you. We have to wrap it up because we have to get the votes, but thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
How long will you all be in town?
Excuse me. You guys made and went through extraordinary measures to prevent restrictive voting laws to pass. You did, as you said, a nuclear option, everything you could to stop it from happening. Do you feel like your federal Democratic partners here in D.C. are doing just as much? Are they doing everything they can?
Absolutely. And they have given us a lot of time. I mean, we've spent a lot of time with the Speaker today, and for her to be here, leave, come back, she has been very supportive. So has our Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. Some of us have had 2 meetings with him today. So everybody has been extremely supportive and accessible.
And one more follow-up. The other senator that wasn't at that lunch today was Senator Sinema. Are there any conversations about approaching her and seeing if she can jump on board with this?
Yeah, we're talking to everybody.
We're trying to reach out to everybody.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hey, man.